Good morning. Good morning. I want to talk this morning about Jane Eyre. This is on my brain, and I was thinking about what book do I really want to talk about this morning, and the book I want to talk about is Jane Eyre. Jane Eyre is a book that first of all, it's been around forever. It's classic, in case you don't know. It is a book written by Charlotte Bronte, and it it is the book that we use every September for Eyre of September, which is a reading challenge that has gone for 2 seasons now, and so we are looking forward to the third this coming September in 2026. And it is, should I tell you? Okay. I have started trying something new. I cannot drink coffee. I love coffee, but I can't drink it. And so I have started trying an organic coconut milk powder with hot water to make coconut milk. And then you have to use hot water for it to make it. And then I found a roasted chicory, which I brew, and I use a small amount of that in the coconut milk, and then I add some more hot water. Right now, that's my coffee substitute. I'm trying it. I'm seeing if it works for me. The taste is different, but not unpleasant, and it has at least a memory of coffee, and so that helps me. Okay. I want to talk now about Jane Eyre. So we do the Eyre of September, where we read Jane Eyre and we think about it, meditate on it. Jane Eyre is a book that people have, as I've looked at what other people think of Jane Eyre, some people find Jane Eyre to be a masterpiece. Other people find Jane Eyre to be the character herself to be so whiny that they don't want to have anything to do with it. I don't consider Jane Eyre herself as a character to be whiny. I do consider the book itself to be beautifully written, but I also don't love all the characters. When I first read it, obviously, I had some qualms with Mr. Rochester, and I was challenged on that by people who just love the book so much and love Mr. Rochester so much that they just couldn't imagine anyone not enjoying Mr. Rochester, anyone not enjoying every single aspect of the book. But the problem is, these characters aren't saints, and they aren't meant to be just loved and every single thing that they do loved. They're meant to be read and challenged. They're meant to be, you read the story, and then you look at the characters and you ponder, what life choices did these characters make, and how did that turn out? And Mr. Rochester makes some really bad decisions. His reasons for making those decisions, he's broken. He allowed the world to decide for him what his morals should be, instead of making that decision for himself. He comes across as arrogant, and I do think there's a part of that in him. I say that I really think there's a part of that in him because I feel like he really expresses that he was obstinate, he was arrogant, he didn't, his humility was lacking. Somewhere in the book, he does admit that. Jane Eyre, she was a young child who needed proper formation. She had certain natural bents that were maybe not the most positive. You know, she had a temper. She was really, really frustrated with her life circumstance. I don't think anyone would have gone through her life circumstance without being really, really frustrated. And she was really, really frustrated. She was put in a position. Her parents died. Her uncle, who did love her, you know, her parents loved her, her uncle loved her, he took her on, but then he got sick and he died. Before he died, he made his wife promise to treat Jane as her own. So she's lost her parents who love her dearly. She's lost her uncle who loved her dearly. I'm not really sure how people expect her to act at that point. We can say she's whiny, okay, but if you were a small child, having lost your parents, having lost your uncle, you know, the only people who ever really loved you, would you not be a little bit like that? You know, would you not act out some? As adults, I think it's challenging not to act out that way. And this is a child. So then her aunt really didn't want to love Jane as her own, didn't want to raise her as her own. Her aunt had a lot of selfishness in her. A lot of selfishness, and that really comes out in the book. The bitterness, the selfishness, the arrogance, the pride, the meanness, just the meanness in this aunt. And she does not treat Jane as her own. Instead, she abuses Jane and allows her children to abuse Jane. And Jane reaches a point where she has a breakdown. And at that point, when she has that breakdown, she is no longer able to tolerate this treatment. And this forces a situation that I've thought about this and I've thought about this. You know, this could have gone two ways, okay? Jane could have been raised in love, and she could have been well respected, well loved, and given a place in society and developed character and grace and all those things in the home of her aunt. Or, as it is, and most people know, Jane was shipped off to a school for orphans and the extremely poor and was mistreated horrendously, as they all were. And it was so bad. During the Victorian era, children were greatly mistreated to begin with. They were not valued. The poor were not valued. The mistreatment, people think they're mistreated now. In the Victorian era, it was so much worse, and there were no social services. And this was a quote-unquote church-run type of boarding school. But even in the Victorian era, as awful as children and the poor were treated, as awful as they were treated, even this school was so bad, so much worse, that even in that era, they were called to the carpet. Okay, things have to change here. That is how bad it was. and children died in this school. It was literally horrendous treatment. They were not hardly fed anything. And of course, how any of them left that school with faith is beyond me, because they were taught, if you're given proper care, if you're given food, if you're given clothing, if you're given a warm place to sleep, if you're given adequate sleep and education, then you'll become wicked. And that says a lot about how religion is twisted oftentimes for abuse, and how people are, adults are abused within religion as well, because they're taught these abusive beliefs, and then the true faith is completely lost, and they then have their children subjected to it, and then their children have to struggle through that. So it is diabolical. I recently heard the most evil demon is the religious demon, and I believe that with all my heart, as I've seen what happens to people of all ages in the name of religion. It is so evil and rules a great deal today. So this is a huge, and you see some of that in Jane Eyre, and you realize that, the fact that Jane was able to come out of this school, out of her hard upbringing, with a faith in God and an integrity, shows who she really is. She's not some whiny little character. That girl has strength. She has backbone. She has grit and determination, and truthfully, she has humility. And she laid all of her wounds, all of her cares onto the Lord, and He brought her to a good place. And that says a lot. That says a lot. So there's more. Jane was enticed into a situation where her heart was true, but it was a situation that would sacrifice her faith, and she would have to sin against God in order to remain true to her heart, what her heart was saying, but in innocence she had walked this way. But once she knew the truth, she had to make a decision. And I do believe that happens to us in innocence so often. We end up in situations, and then we have to, once we know the truth, then we have to do something about it. And that's so hard. She made a decision, and what we see is what happens after that. And it's not easy. We learn that even when you do the right thing, it's not going to be easy. That's not an automatic, oh, it's going to be easy, God's going to bless that. It's not automatic. Instead, she really suffers yet again. And then, she has to navigate through life honoring God, honoring her heart, honoring where she's at, accepting where God has allowed her to be without being bitter. And I truly believe that as I look at Jane, I see her accomplishing that. And I am so moved by her goodness and her light, and by her integrity and by the lessons that I learned through just, you know, watching her navigate really hard things. And the generosity that she shows when she didn't have to. She could have so easily, you know, allowed selfishness to come into play, and she didn't. And it's an incredible novel with a lot of life lessons to grasp from it. You have to look at it with different eyes than I do believe a lot of people look at it with. You have to look at it with different eyes. But if you look at it through the lens of, you know, where did this child come from? Where is she now? How, you know, look at the path. It's incredible. I would also say Mr. Rochester, I was very angry with Mr. Rochester for most of the book. And then I came to realize at the end of the book where he had come from. And I realized that he really represents what happens to so many of us who are wounded. You know, Jane represents, here is the Pilgrim's Progress path. But Mr. Rochester, he represents what happens so often when we have wounds and horrible things happen to us, and then we don't stay on that path, but we allow the world to determine for us what's going to be the answer. And pretty soon we are so blind to what's true because pretty soon the only thing we can see is what we have, what we've accepted. You know, our minds can tell us these things are true no matter what. And so I love contrasting for myself. I love contrasting the two characters and seeing how even, you know, when we've gone so far, you know, God can go farther still. And it's a beautiful story from that perspective. You have to look at it through the lens of faith to see the true depth of the story. I've never been able to see how you could any other way and it hold the deepest meaning, you know, because if you look at it from the perspective of the world, then I don't think you appreciate the ending, because the ending is very faith-centered. And so I truly see this as a book that a Christian wrote. I truly see this as a book that shows you deep things about the walk that we can have with Christ. And it's an exciting read. It's a deep read. It's a quiet and still read. You have to be willing to sit in the quiet with Jane. You have to be willing to be bored a little bit with Jane. Just sit with her and be bored a little bit and just be quiet with her while she shows you these two paths and she walks with you. You know, it's a quiet thing. It's not full of action and suspense. It's the days are long and quiet, and you have to let your mind picture it. You have to ponder each part and just sit in the quiet with her. But the reward is really powerful. It's really powerful. Okay, those are my thoughts right now, and I just want to put them out here. Maybe they'll have meaning, maybe they won't. They do for me, but I wanted to share them because this is a book that has gained some real meaning for me, and therefore it's something that I want to share. All right, see you later.